When looking for daily activities that have the potential to pay us back 10x in the future, we might naturally think of exercise that increases our focus and energy, writing blog posts or creating videos. Once we have started to build a net worth and build some stability in life, we might naturally find ourselves focusing on these activities and try to spend a lot of time doing them. But we might also look for other small habits that might have the potential to pay us back 10x in the future. And one such small activity can be being generous to the right people. One very powerful activity is to create relationships with movers and shakers, meaning influential people. And one effective way of doing this could be to send thank you cards and gifts. Why this is so phenomenal is because almost no one sends postcards anymore. And because shipping has become so expensive, almost no one sends gifts by post anymore. For example, on your last birthday, you might have been greeted a lot on your social media profiles. But when was the last time you received a physical postcard? Chances are that this was quite a long time ago, but chances are also that you kept this postcard on your fridge or somewhere because it was so rare. I've heard this tip from multiple sources, from the music industry, from business and from investors, that sending postcards and thank you letters can be a very, very effective way of building relationships. One example of this is the artist Tove Lo, who in the beginning of her career, she was working as a bartender to pay her bills. And one time an A&R came to the bar where she was working, and she decided to offer him a free shot of whiskey. And this became the starting point for her, and it opened up the opportunity to write songs for famous artists like Icona Pop and Ellie Goulding. Later she got the opportunity to work in the group called Wolf Cousins, which wrote songs for some of the biggest artists in the world. So after several years of being a successful songwriter, she said, okay, I want to be an artist myself. So she wrote the song Scream My Name, which was featured in The Mockingjay, the Hunger Games movies. And that was the start of her becoming a famous artist. And all of this started with that she offered a free shot of whiskey to the right person. She was being generous to the right person. So imagine most people would have thought, what difference would a shot of whiskey make? Why should I be generous to this person who is seemingly already more successful than me, etc. Another story of a person who was generous to the right person was Sarah Blakely, who had designed a new type of female underwear. Before starting her own business, she had worked at Disney World, she had done some stand-up comedy, and she had done door-to-door sales selling fax machines. She did not like using the normal pantyhose with an open toe shoe. So she decided to try to cut that part off to make the feet bare. So this became the first version of her product. And after a few samples, she managed to get a deal with the department store Neiman Marcus, who wanted to try out to sell her product. So she called all her friends, family members, and acquaintances and asked them to go to visit the department stores and buy this product. And she offered to actually pay for the product herself, just to try to build up a demand. And at this time, she was running out of money. But she decided to do an act of generosity and send a pair for free to Oprah Winfrey as a gift. Usually when a business owner is running out of money, they panic. But not Sarah. She tapped into generosity instead and sent this pair to Oprah, and the rest is history. And in 2012, she ended up on Time magazine as the youngest billionaire in the world, and she has also been a guest investor in Shark Tank in many episodes. And it all started out with a seemingly small act of generosity. So why are acts of generosity so powerful? Well, investor Monish Pabrai, he has a theory about this. He thinks that this comes from when we were hunter-gatherers. Because then when someone had taken down a large mammoth, we did not have any fridges to store that meat. So the only place we could store the meat was in the bellies of our neighbors. So when someone had seen success in their hunting, they invited all other people to join for a large feast, because they knew that when someone else had a success in their hunting, they would do the same to them. So they would see a reciprocity of that act. So that is the basis of goodwill and how it works. And this is such a strong impulse for us, so it still works very much today in today's society. Monish Prabhai, he also tells a story of Hare Krishna, how they use this principle. So they basically would have one person offering business people a free flower, the gift of a free flower in airports. And then another person would approach them asking for a donation later on. So they saw that if the person had accepted the gift of a free flower, they would donate, and they would donate more than someone who had not received the gift. So when Tove Lo offered this A&R a free shot of whiskey, he felt the need to do something for her and give her an opportunity. And when Sarah Blakely sent Oprah the gift, she thought the product was great, and then she felt the need to do something for her, so she promoted the product. Even the famous investor Warren Buffett takes the time to send appreciation letters to people that he admires. For example, one time Monish Prabhai, he receives a letter from Warren Buffett expressing admiration for the Dakshana Foundation, a non-profit organization which Monish Prabhai has founded. So if Warren Buffett, who is in his 90s, takes the time to do this act, we should probably do the same. And I think the reason why we should do this is that it becomes a magnifier of what we're doing. So no matter what we're doing in life, we are dependent on other people to help us. And if we can do something to increase that process and speed up that process and create relationships and strengthen relationships with important people, that would be a very powerful thing to do. I also think that a lot of quality of life comes from the relationships we have. So finding ways of how we can strengthen and deepen those relationships can be very powerful. Another way to realize the power of generosity is by reflecting on the opposite behavior. And can you think of a person who always takes a little bit more than they give? They might want to try to save as much money as possible and always try to take a little bit more from others than they give themselves. Perhaps they order the most expensive meal in a restaurant when they know someone else is paying for it. Perhaps they give very inexpensive gifts and hoping to receive more expensive gifts themselves to make a profit in this transaction. And in the moment, they might have thought that they made a great deal because they earned a profit in doing so and in doing these activities. But what they're not thinking about is that they're undermining their relationships, both their private relationships and their professional relationships, and they're undermining their own future. Because when they have this behavior, soon very few people will put up with them. People will start to avoid them. And people really like to gossip about others who are cheap. So we really want to make sure not to be this person, because the price of doing this is way too high, so we cannot afford to pay it. Because this is the reciprocity working in reverse. So if we're trying to do projects in the future, then people will not want to help us any longer. And when this person ends up needing support from other people, no one will answer. So Warren Buffett, he said, "The chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken." And taking more than one gives is an excellent example of just this. If you still don't believe in the power of generosity, we could look at the example of James Stephen Donaldson, also known as Mr. Beast. So he has created a $1 billion brand by being generous. So in his videos on his YouTube channel, he shows more generosity than few others would have the bravery or audacity to do, by giving away cars, money, and creating large philanthropic projects. He has created one of the largest YouTube channels in the world. So they explain in the video that many of these people who have extreme blurry eyesight could regain their vision by a 10-minute surgery. And seeing that video and seeing the responses of the people regaining their eyesight is quite an amazing experience, and it really makes you want to share that video with someone else. And that is the power of this generosity. And I guess many people felt the same way, because the video has been shared and watched 203 million times. So what are some ways that you could become more generous towards others that would help you in the future? And if you're today seeing some effects of reversed reciprocity, where other people don't want to help you, how could you correct that? How could you instead tap into this generosity so that it can help you in the future. So write down a list of this and start doing these actions today. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next week.